Hi, I'm Grace, and welcome to my talk. This is Negative and Intrusive Thoughts, What to Do When Your Mind Becomes Your Worst Enemy. So just before I begin, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm a member of the National Anti-Bullying Youth Board, which is run by the Diana Award. In this role, I've extended my knowledge of bullying, its impact, and how we can tackle it better, with a particular focus on schools. The work we have done with the Youth Board has helped me to see the links between tackling bullying and improving mental health. Over the last academic year, I have become a mental health student prefect within my school, and I've become student chair for the next year. I will be undertaking my Level 2 ILM Young Minds qualification, which I hope will allow me to get a deeper understanding of mental health and mental illness. I'm very passionate about mental health and improving mental health resourcing across the UK, especially for young people and especially post-pandemic. I'm a firm believer that taking a preventative approach to health is extremely important, and that techniques to foster good mental health from a young age should be implemented. With this in mind, I'd like to begin my talk. So, Chapter 1. Negative Thoughts, Negative Life. We all have a little voice in the back of our heads, don't we? It's our internal monologue. It's the voice we hear most constantly, the voice we hear when we wake up in the morning, the voice we hear last thing before we fall asleep. Now let me ask you a question. What is this voice telling you? Imagine you have a friend. The friend begins insulting you, your hair, the way your voice sounds, how you dress. Over the time this becomes constant. How do you respond? Laugh it off? Challenge them? Eventually get annoyed, angry, upset, leave even? If you're secure in yourself, all of these things may seem possible. But to me, and I assume many others, it is not. The consistency of the negativity in your life begins to wear you down. An illusory truth effect may occur, which is when someone begins to accept something that is objectively not true as fact because of repeated exposure. Even the most confident of people can fall prey to this. The first time your friend says something negative, you are able to ignore it, but the more you hear it reinforced, the more you begin to question whether what they're saying may have some truth in it. Confirmation bias may even play a role. The friend might have pointed out something that you are already insecure about, and them saying it just confirms what you already believe to be true. In many ways, we cannot help but feel insecure. It's hardwired into us as humans. Psychological research has revealed the power of negativity bias, which put simply is the tendency for humans to focus more on negative comments, events, thoughts, reactions than positive ones. From an evolutionary perspective, there is an obvious advantage to responding to negative stimuli and feedback, because those who paid most attention to negative feedback were the ones most likely to survive and to survive the threats of that society. However, in today's society, negativity bias no longer provides an evolutionary advantage, and instead it's a disadvantage because we no longer live in this cutthroat world. I will be coming back to this later in my talk. However, I believe that even though most people would find it difficult to have someone around them that was consistently negative, most people would at least recognise that the friend was being negative, even if the person was accepting what they said. And while removing a negative person from our lives can be difficult, it's certainly not impossible. That little voice in the back of our heads though, that voice that has been there since we can remember and will remain there till we die, we can't get rid of it. Most of the time, we don't even question the thoughts that come into our heads. This is why negative and intrusive thoughts can be so damaging, especially when we're hearing them on a regular basis, and especially if they're going unchallenged. Intrusive thoughts can be slightly different. Similarly to most negative thoughts, they occur randomly. While in both cases, the thoughts are unwanted. Intrusive thoughts are more actively understood and recognised as unwanted by the person experiencing them. Intrusive thoughts are also more likely to be repetitive in nature, although negative thoughts can be repetitive. Both types of thoughts can ultimately be debilitating to the individual who's experiencing them and take a negative toll on their sense of self. Like with negative thoughts, anyone can experience an intrusive thought. One study found that 94% of participants had experienced at least one intrusive thought in the last 3 months before taking part in the study. However, for most people, intrusive thoughts are few and far between and are not experienced on a regular basis. Intrusive thoughts can be symptomatic of OCD, and those experiencing intrusive thoughts may make a person begin behaving obsessively and compulsively in an attempt to counteract these thoughts. These obsessions and compulsions have the ability to get in the way of someone's everyday life and leave them in a permanent state of anxiety. If somebody interprets intrusive thoughts as a representation of their actual beliefs, it can harm their self-esteem, as they begin to believe that there is something wrong or bad about them as a person. Although for some, external help may need to be sought to solve this issue of recurring negative and/or intrusive thoughts, there are certainly things that we can all do to reduce these thoughts and the impact that they may have on our lives. So the second chapter is called The Primate. In Buddhism, monkey mind is a term that describes a mental state under which a person feels unsettled, restless, capricious, whimsical, fanciful, inconstant, confused, indecisive, uncontrollable. Over 2.5 millennia ago, the Buddha compared the untrained human mind to drunken monkeys, and thus the idea of the monkey mind was born within the religion. In his 2012 book, The Chimp Paradox, Professor Steve Peters identifies that in each of us there is a chimp. The chimp is our emotional machine. Peters is keen to emphasise that the chimp is neither good or bad, but it has the capacity to do a lot of damage to our lives if we give it too much power. Unlike the human mind, the chimp is irrational and so builds up impressions on situations not necessarily with regard to facts, but more to feelings. Managing the chimp, he argues, is key. The chimp can be tamed and eventually befriended, and I will return to some of his proposed management techniques later on in the talk. Chapter 3 is called Imposter Syndrome. Imposter syndrome is marked by feelings of self-doubt or lack of deserving or of accolades and opportunities. It does not matter how much one achieves or how well others perceives them, the individual still feels this way. In fact, imposter syndrome is commonly associated with high achieving. Attending an all-girls grammar school, imposter syndrome is something that I know anecdotally is experienced commonly amongst my peers, and I myself have felt it. Women, especially otherwise marginalised women, are thought to be more at risk of experiencing imposter syndrome than their male counterparts. Women working in predominantly male spaces such as the corporate world are also more at risk. As a BBC article points out, the reasons for this may be multifold, but include that women are systematically taught that they will achieve less and are also more likely to feel out of place because they have less role models. A now quite well-known statistic is that men will apply for jobs if they meet 60% of the criteria. Women will only apply if they meet 100%. While this is not indicative of women having imposter syndrome necessarily, I believe this is related. As I stated earlier, I believe negativity bias has become an evolutionary disadvantage for those of us who allow it to influence our thinking, as it has the capacity to discourage us from opportunities. Our thoughts are naturally affected by our background and the messages we hear every day, either directly or indirectly. Therefore, it's easy to see why women and people who are marginalised or from minority groups are more likely to experience negative thinking, as this is the social conditioning of which they have received. Self-doubt is learnt. However, self-belief is also learnt. It's an active process, not a trait or a quality. It's something we have to work towards over time. And believing on ourselves may be entirely non-linear. Chapter 4, Retrain the Brain. Peters does not suggest that any of us try to control the chimp. Instead, we need to manage it. This is because the chimp is the emotional centre. It's very powerful. Every human interaction and emotion is processed by the chimp first. Therefore, we cannot necessarily attempt to control it because we cannot completely ignore the emotional side of ourselves. As humans, emotions are an important part of who we are, and it's what makes us human. The first step is to ensure, however, that the chimp does not hijack our brain. And to do this, he suggests we must first question all thoughts that come into our heads. Is this me talking or the chimp? If you recognise that it's the chimp speaking, you need to manage the thought. And the second step is a choice. Do I act on what the chimp is telling me? Understanding that the chimp interprets all information emotionally can help us to make informed decisions about the choices we make. Thirdly, we must manage the chimp. And he suggests 3 ways we can do this: exercise, box, banana. Exercising the chimp is essentially allowing yourself to express and process your emotions. However, it is important that we do this in a controlled environment, quite possibly alone, as we do not want to take out our emotions on others. The box is fighting the chimp with facts. Sometimes these facts won't be enough, and the chimp will not be placated. However, you still have that choice. Do I act on what the chimp is telling me? And before acting, you might want to throw the chimp a banana. The banana is not a band-aid. It cannot solve the problem, but it can help to manage the chimp in the short term. We can either distract it or reward it. For example, by rewarding it, we don't want to do a task. So we say, if I do this task, I will reward myself, for example, with a break. So that therefore motivates us that's appealing to our emotions and allowing us to get on with the task at hand that we need to do. Using facts and rationality can be very powerful in challenging negative and intrusive thoughts. In order to tackle automatic negative thoughts, questioning these thoughts can be very significant in taking away their power and credibility. For example, you have a thought, but you ask yourself, is this thought a fact or an opinion? There, you're interrupting the thought. Another one could be, what advice would I give someone if they presented this as a problem to me? Thinking about what you would tell someone else can help to build up a rational picture of what you should do yourself. And this is something that I learnt as part of my mental health training, and I do believe that has personally helped me to get on top of negative thinking. Intrusive thoughts can be similarly tackled with the questioning technique. Is this a representation of who I am as a person, for example? As this will help us to realise that the intrusive thoughts are not a reflection of us as a person, but instead just a thought. And something that I have recently started doing is gratitude journaling. This is when you write down everything you are grateful for on a daily basis. And I believe this puts into perspective any doubt or worry that you have about yourself or your life. The key thing to remember, I think, is not to push negative and intrusive thoughts away, and instead embrace them. Suppressing how you feel, even if you think your thoughts and feelings are not helping you, in the short term or the long term, will always backfire. As Peters emphasises, we should try and manage, not control, our emotions. I'd like to leave you with a quote. My quote. Your mind can be your worst enemy or your best friend. It depends on what you think. Thank you for listening to my talk.